nod and we'll start.
Give you a little extra sleep tomorrow morning.
You still have to go in early?
I'll be there, yeah.
Okay, should be good to go. I got us recording.
Good to go. Okay.
And unmuted.
I'll call the meeting to order. Sonia, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Wire?
Here.
Commissioner Phil?
Here.
Mayor Denner?
Here. We have the agenda in front of us. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So approved.
I'll second that.
Any further comments or discussion? Not hearing any. Sonia, will you take roll call vote?
Commissioner Wire?
Here.
Commissioner Phil?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Mayor Denner?
Sorry.
Mayor Denner?
Aye. Adam, you're probably more up on it. Should we announce that Commissioner Waldner isn't here?
I suppose we better, yeah.
Okay.
I think if we just say it right away, then we don't have to come back to it.
Okay. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody knows that Commissioner Waldner isn't here at the meeting. Just so you know, we're not leaving him out. We'll go down to appearances acknowledgement. There is nothing under appearances acknowledgement. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Any further comments or discussion? Not hearing any. Sonia, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Phil?
Here.
Commissioner
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Wire?
Aye.
Mayor Denner?
Aye.
Thank
We'll move down into unfinished business. We have none, so we'll move into new business. Item number 1, Sonia, if you want to bring us up to authorize the mayor to sign contract Muni Code recodification of city ordinance.
So this is you guys have been talking about recodification for some time. This is a quote from Municode, and we're looking to have you guys authorize the mayor to go ahead and sign the contract. The price that they gave you last spring, same thing, $14,950 for the recodification. That basically involves them taking all of our existing code, which we've uploaded to them already, and they will then review it all, compile it all, and give you a legal review as to what they recommend you do as far as removing old code, adding in some new things, and that whole time frame will take between 10 and 12 months is what they're estimating, and then they'll bring it back before then, have you guys look at it, make any decisions, and we can at that time send it out to the police department and the various departments to see if they all agree, and then you guys would vote on that new code and then sign an ordinance to enact the new code. In addition to that, in this code, there is also a posting functionality which allows us to have all of our new code, which will sit accessible on our website, so that we can go through and search. So the police department, your building codes department, they can all go through and search the existing code instead of trying to find it in a PDF file, which is not at all user friendly. And so what we're proposing is the $11.95, which is this Municode value pricing that includes that hosting, but then it also includes several other functions allowing us to search through codes of other municipalities. So when we're looking to write new code, it'll allow us to go in and search and see what's already out there and see if it applies to us, making it a little easier for us to write new code. I also added on there, I would recommend you take on the Muni Docs, which allows us to put things like minutes and agendas and other documents out there that are also in a searchable format, so that when we want to download and talked, the mayor and I talked a little bit. We're thinking we would probably request one copy of it bound, just for historical purposes, and then the rest of it is all, we can download that off. I do have Josh and James that are from Unicode, if you have specific questions that I can't answer for you, on the line as well.
Okay. Do I have a motion to authorize the mayor to sign contract Unicode recodification of city ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any comments or discussion with either Josh or you said James?
Yeah.
Okay.
So our annual package, that will cover any recodification that occurs. So they'll just pick up, clean up every year for us as we move
Correct,
forward, so
correct.
we don't have to let this go and every so many years come back and do this.
Yes, so we would, and we can, according to them, we can set the schedule at which we want to upload new documents to them, whether it's monthly or quarterly or whatever.
Okay.
And then they will add that into our current code so it stays current at all times.
I think I've been kind of pushing on this, and I think it's money well spent at this point that we get these things updated. And I think it'll make us far more efficient than what we are right now. So I do appreciate you getting them aligned and getting this done. I do think it's something that was well overdue. So thank you.
Sounds like there's some added features too that we didn't really
Yes,
intend
the quote from
to
last
capture.
spring actually was actually a little less expensive, and it'll enable us to add a little more features.
I guess I don't have any questions for them. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So.
Okay. Any other comments, discussion? Not hearing any. Sonia, you want to take roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Wire,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Mayor Denner.
Aye. Okay, item number 2. Chad, bring us up to speed on approved first reading and set date of hearing as Monday, March 1st, 2021. Ordinance number 1630, amend Appendix B zoning section 17.02.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor, members of the commission, members of the public listening and here. Included in the agenda packet for this item are the unapproved minutes from the Planning Commission from last Tuesday morning, and the proposed ordinance 1630, and the notice of hearing for proposed ordinance for the City Commission, tentatively scheduled for 2 weeks from tonight. So what this is we received a petition to rezone some property. It was in compliance with statute and city standards as far as the submission, and so then that was put onto the Planning Commission agenda. The typical process for a zoning ordinance change is the Planning Commission takes the issue up, and they have a hearing, and they make a recommendation to the City Commission. And then, as I understand it, typically, irregardless of their recommendation, whether it's for denial or approval, it comes before the City Commission to give first and second reading, and then also there is a hearing scheduled for one of those readings as well. And if it's approved, then there's a referral period and so on. And if not, of course, it wouldn't proceed to even have to go through the referral period. So the bulk of the discussion, or a repeat of this discussion perhaps, it could be, it will be next meeting. The applicant or the petitioner it clearly understands that their opportunity to be heard before the commission, in a primary fashion is at the hearing, not tonight. This is the first reading, and so that's a question that they had at the Planning Commission meeting. We said it's likely the hearing will be March 1st. They will get a notice whenever you do set that hearing, should you set it tonight. Very briefly regarding the merits, this is a R60 request to change a parcel that is currently used as a residential to, excuse me, there's a house on this parcel right now. The parcel is located in a heavy manufacturing district. I provided you 2 maps to kind of give you a vicinity indication of where that is. It's immediately adjacent to a residential district. Not most ideal. Typically, it's better to have some light commercial or some heavier residential buffers between those, but regardless, this is a single-family residence that is currently in place, as best as I can tell. That's been in place for a very long time, probably since the life of the structure. And the zoning petition appeal is primarily to change the use of the property and to allow all the different uses allowed by the requested zoning district. It's not typically a specific appeal for a specific project, for an addition or a variance or a conditional use. That's typically Board of Adjustment, and the Planning Commission is the Board of Adjustment. In other words, they would bring forth an appeal, and they would say, well, I really want to do this, and I want to have it this close to the property line, and so on and so forth. And the Board of Adjustment makes the quasi-judicial ruling based upon that. This is typically, you're just saying it's okay to rezone this, and then every different use that's allowed in that proposed zoning district will forever be allowed if it's approved. In other words, it's not necessarily made up for the particulars. In this case, we do know the particulars. The applicant was at the hearing. They wanted to tell a little bit about what their story and so on, and they did. So briefly, to that end, the reason the applicant brought forth the petition is that with the residents in a heavy manufacturing district, they wanted to add an addition. And it's a non-conforming use in that district, and so there's no discretion in the ordinance to allow the administrative official, myself, to approve a building permit there. So I advised the applicant that the only recourse you would have is to try to request to rezone the property. They took the initiative to make the petition to request that. The Planning Commission heard this, as I said, a week ago Tuesday, and they made a recommendation on a 3-2 vote to recommend denial. I believe the appropriate course of action would be for you today would be to approve first reading, set the hearing, and then have the hearing, and then at that time, if you would so choose to concur with their denial and deny it, you could vote in that fashion at that time, or if you would vote to approve it, you could do it at that time. But again, the hearing is scheduled for next meeting. But this is a public item on the agenda, so there can be discussion here as well. With that, I was rambling a lot. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Do I have a motion to approve first reading and set date of hearing, ordinance number 1630, amend Appendix B, zoning section 17.02?
Do we have to set the hearing date?
Yes, set the date as March 1st.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second it.
Okay, any comments or discussion?
Chad, do we have other properties that this may happen to as well,
Yes,
that we could run into this again?
Throughout time, as these zoning districts were developed, dating back 30, 40, 50 more years in many cases, there is less than ideal situations, if you will, out there where there isn't the best buffer, like I had alluded to earlier. In other words, this is about the worst type of conflict one could have, is a heavy manufacturing and a residential, because you can imagine the different uses could lead to issues there. It's currently just down the street. If you look at this other map, it's currently that way now. Right across the street, it's heavy manufacturing, and right next to residential. It is what it is. There are other locations where this is, particularly in this area, but in various spots throughout town, there's these similar type of conflicts. Not at, again, this is the worst, so there's not as many of these. There's of course many areas where commercial and residential buffers one another, and that's not without conflict at times as well, but,
How did a residence get built in a heavy manufacturing? Do we know that?
no, I
Okay.
don't.
That house has been there for
Is that,
75, 80 years. That's
I'm trying to think. Of
been there a long
It
time.
could have been the zoning rules at the time that allowed it to be done. It could have been a variance, or maybe it just wasn't a big deal then, and they didn't think that it would be a big deal.
Sure.
I'm not giving you a very good answer. to
No, I
how
was
it
just
can
curious.
happen,
It was just,
Yeah.
it's interesting how a home gets built in a heavy manufacturing.
Yeah, and we, you may have seen some of the minutes for the planning commission. They talked, one of the points of discussion with them was they wanted to look at this a little bit closer, in maybe a little bit more of a comprehensive way. So they, as you know, we're currently going our comprehensive land use plan update, and once that's done, that may have some recommendations related to this and similar type of circumstances. Probably not this one specifically, but generally it'll make comments to that. But then what has happened in the past is we've worked with First District to update our zoning ordinance to try to maybe remedy some of these things or try to do this. Sometimes there isn't a good remedy. In other words, the residence doesn't want to change theirs off of residential, go to heavy,
Yeah.
and vice versa. If the other folks don't, and the surrounding neighbors don't want to allow that, because it creates challenges.
Sure.
So there may be, my point of bringing that up is there likely will be some discussions about this in the future, and the board had conversations like that. They had a very good discussion in their meeting, and it likely will be discussed subsequently as well.
It's definitely a unique situation. There's no doubt about it.
I noticed on the computer when you sent out the maps,
Yes, sir.
going down the alley, it looks like at the west end, you're approximately 15 to 20 feet north of the alley. Is that?
Yeah, what I would say is that those lines are approximate. There's language in the ordinance that talks about interpretations, the proper way to interpret it. As you know, the map is the whole town, and so when you zoom into a very specific area, it could be drawn to with a little more precision. What I would tell you is that line is intended to be in the center of the alley, and so it actually, a small portion of these lots, it would not be interpreted that a portion of these lots on the north side of the alley are in the heavy manufacturing. They're actually entirely in the residential district.
And I realize when Classic Cuts or whatever, Cottage Cuts, excuse me, went to remodel, I realize there's no residential there, but when you issued a building permit for them, was it on the same deal or base as what it is here?
Well, it was a little different. That remodel was done in.
I realize nobody's living in there.
Right. That was remodel was done in before '09, I believe, and so that was when our zoning ordinance changed and said, and it made even business uses in the industrial district. It looks at them a little closer now. Before that time, it wasn't as stringent, and so they were able to convert a residence into a business without issue at that time. Of course, it's making it, in some ways, it's making it less of a conflict because you're going from a residence right next to and in a heavy manufacturing zone to a commercial business right next to and into a heavy manufacturing zone. It's a little bit less of an impact. They'd have a harder time going the other way, of course, going from a business or a commercial to a residence at this point in time, if they wanted to try to convert that. So.
Chad, is
how
that
big addition is she gonna put on? Has she said?
She did say, but I do not have that in front of me. I don't recall.
Okay.
Chad, the two properties to the right of this property, there are two properties there, correct?
To the east,
Yes.
yes, one.
That's cottage
that's correct.
cuts.
One's
One
cottage
is
cuts
what-
in the corner, correct?
Yeah, that's what Mr. Commissioner Phil was referring
Yep.
to. as
What's to the
cottage
north
cuts.
of cottage cuts?
The other one, I believe that's just a storage building.
Just a storage building. So this is the only residential piece of
Yes,
house that's in this whole section.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson, you had your hand up. Well, I guess there's two Mr. Johnsons. Michael?
Yeah, okay. I don't like telling people what they can and can't do with their property, but this is, this is going to too big of an extreme. If the city could give us as owners an assurance that we're not gonna have a problem with future owners, that, you know, it's on record saying, hey, this is it. 1968, my dad got a building permit for a shop on his lot. Went through all the zoning, whatever that he needed at that time, and we got nothing but problems from neighbor after neighbor after neighbor. You know, I mean, it wasn't all the neighbors, it was a particular group. And we were within zoning, everything was kosher, okay? So I don't wanna go through that again. Because if, for some reason, we start using the property for, you know, equipment, and at 2 in the morning, we're starting trucks, or Saturday afternoon, they're having a barbecue, and I wanna run a crusher to test run to see that it's set right, I don't wanna have a problem. And that's where I'm at. If this owner and future owners, I mean, it's just, it's too big a jump. And if everybody's on the same page, you know, you buy this property, you're inheriting, you know, your ghetto to the west, or however you wanna word it, then that's fine. But if you think you're gonna change everything, then I'm against it. I mean, then I'm gonna have a problem, if I have problems. But, I guess, you know, if I can't have assurances in writing, then I don't want it. So, thank you.
Can I ask you this question?
Yeah.
If we don't change the rezoning, if we just up and let her build addition and still keep it as heavy manufacturing, do you have a problem with her putting an addition on her house?
No, I don't
If
have a problem with
if
it.
we don't change any zoning or anything?
If it's still heavy manufacturing and she wants to put an addition on, I don't have a problem with that, myself. Because we're not changing the zoning. I don't know if you can do that,
No.
but,
Yeah.
but if you can, fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'd be more comfortable with that than I would with rezoning and then having this kind of come back to haunt me 5-10 years down the road, or what.
Chad, are they asking for a permit or a rezoning, or they come together
Yes.
as a package?
So, yes, to answer your question, their petition was to rezone the property. The original discussion was they wanted a permit. They weren't ready for a permit, they were just asking. But in essence, they wanted a building permit. And because there's no discretion, it's classified as a non-conforming use, we could not issue the permit. To that end, and towards the point of Commissioner Thill, it would not be possible unless you changed the zoning ordinance in a different fashion to just allow her to build the garage. I mean, in other words, you'd have to come up with some different language to allow. In other words, I don't think, the ordinance doesn't give you or me, to be honest, flexibility to just waive it as a commission action. You can go amend the ordinance in another fashion and say, well, this addition is no longer considered a non-conforming use, you know, but we'd have to look at that and come up with a scheme to do that. So, did I answer your question, and did I address your question? I think I would agree with Mr. Johnson is that he kind of made the statement that he didn't know if you could do that. My interpretation of the ordinance And I've talked with First District, who helps us out with this, and our attorney as well, is that you cannot, you couldn't just allow her to put on the addition with the ordinance as it reads today. And leave it heavy manufacturing.
Yeah, like I said, you know, I hate telling people they can't do what they want with their property, but then again, I don't want it to come back and haunt me. Or haunt us, so that's where we're at. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Dan?
No, a couple places, I guess Chad said there's some.
Could you step to the mic, please?
Oh. I'm Dan Johnson with Johnson Brothers Excavation. I'm partner owner in this property. Chad said there was some other properties in town that were like this. Now, I look at this map, a lot of purple, not one spot of yellow in there. If it was on the edge of something, maybe. Put the shoe on the other foot. There's a development going in on the northeast part of town. I don't think he'd probably want you to rezone one lot in the middle of that for heavy manufacturing. That would be my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chad, just so I'm clear on it, we really have two options here. We could rezone it and let them build, or we change our ordinance and let them, so they're able to put an addition on in the heavy manufacturing. Because my understanding is, after talking to you, is if they were wanting to do remodeling within the footprint of that house, they can get a permit.
They can.
But if they want to add on, that's the kicker. Correct. Okay.
And you'd be changing the ordinance for every circumstance where there's a non-conforming use.
Okay.
You know, it wouldn't be specific to this location. So, you know, does that make sense? You know,
Yep.
if you did that.
I just have one. How many homes do we have that are sitting in heavy manufacturing zoning?
You know, I can't give you that right off the top of my head. Not a lot.
Okay.
Not a lot. I should probably clarify, when I said there's not a lot, if any, quite frankly. There's a lot of zones, areas like this, where there's heavy manufacturing right up next to residential.
Sure.
You can see this map that
Right.
shows the
Yeah.
boundaries.
But what I'm saying is, how many residents sit within the heavy manufacturing zone?
I don't have a count for you,
Okay.
but it's few and far between.
Okay. So I guess that leads me to my question of this non-conforming, if we were to make that change. How many people would that necessarily impact if we were to change the ordinance?
Well, it would change for situations like that. There's a ripple through in, I don't want to say infinite, but all sorts of different.
Sure.
Because there's a number of things in the ordinance where if you read it, in other words, anywhere there's a use that's not allowed in the current zoning, that's defined as non-conforming.
Okay.
And so it could be a commercial versus residential, it could be a commercial versus heavy manufacturing, it could be a residential in a heavy manufacturing or light manufacturing, like this example.
Yeah.
But if you would do that, it would apply to every situation.
Sure.
You know, it's not specific to this.
Right, and I understand that.
So how many? That would be, I don't want to say impossible, but
Okay.
pretty difficult
It's
to
just
say.
a
If you
simple
change it universally over the whole town.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I got one last question. Is there, I know in the planning commission, when you give a variance, they can set conditions. Is there a way, if we rezone this, to set conditions like Mr. Johnson was asking, to make sure everybody's on the same page?
Okay, so the conditions are available in the Board of Adjustment.
Okay,
That's a quasi-judicial
Okay.
action
Right.
that the Board of Adjustment has. This action is a legislative action.
Okay.
You're changing the laws,
Okay.
changing the rules. I would say there's no way to add a condition upon this rezone. I could be wrong, I could talk to our attorney and see, but in other words, referring back to something I stated earlier, is you're changing this parcel, and everything that comes along with residential, you can now do in this, there's no particulars in this application. This is, we're changing it, we want to be able to do everything that everybody else in an R60 district can do in this piece of ground.
okay. Thank you.
Did I answer that?
Yes, you did.
adequately? Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question to that. What else is considered residential R60? Apartment buildings, duplexes?
Yeah, I would refer to, I don't have a copy up here. Basically, our zoning map has three different residential districts, and the map shows where those different districts are. And so, what we're referring to as the R60 would be wherever it shows that on the map, essentially.
Does that include duplexes, apartment buildings?
If they're in that area on the map, it would. If it could be a single-family house, it could be an apartment building. And I'm sure there's examples where there's a business in a residential district as well. We'd have to inventory the entire town.
Oh, I'm just asking what's legal if you rezone this.
Right.
And they put an apartment.
Oh, what's allowed in that
Put a
district?
duplex in
Oh,
there.
yeah, the R60 the title is duplex residence, and so yes, you can put in multifamily dwelling up to a certain extent. You can't put in a 20-plex, but you can put in, I think, just going from memory, I think a 4-plex, for example, is a principal permitted use. In other words, they could just apply and do that.
Now, that might affect the property value if you rezone this, and I want to sell this property, somebody might not be too excited about moving into a place where they'd like to run a business 24 hours a day next to a house.
That's very true.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, we have on the floor a motion to approve first reading and set data hearing March 1st. Yeah, March 1st, ordinance number 1630, amend Appendix B zoning section 17-02.
I have another question before you approve this.
Okay.
If you don't approve this tonight, is it dead?
I would have to, I don't know, Sonia, I know it's not fair to hit you up out of the blue, or I know David doesn't look like he's on. I don't know what happens if you don't approve first reading. I wish I could answer that. I should be able to answer that. It's like any ordinance, I guess.
I guess I've never, since I've been as mayor, have a first reading go down because there's a second reading and we're
Yeah.
not really.
I don't know the answer. I don't know whether it's Robert's rules or statutory requirements.
I guess my opinion would be if the homeowner isn't here tonight, he isn't that excited about it.
Well, again, like Chad said,
Pardon?
they didn't, like Chad said, they don't need to be here on
I
this
understand
one.
that.
But the second one with the set it hearing, I have reached out to them, and that was her understanding that they weren't going to come to this one, but they were going to be at the next one. Any other comments?
So is that cottage cuts, is that in light manufacturing or is that still in the heavy
It's in the same one.
manufacturing?
Same one.
That's in the same heavy manufacturing.
Okay.
Any other comments, discussion? Not hearing any. Sonia, will you take roll call vote?
Commissioner Wire,
Aye.
Commissioner Phil,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Mayor Denner.
Aye. Item number 3 also is Chad. Set bid date for March 4th. Bid number 900, Sidewalk Improvement Project 2021-1.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the commission, members of the public listening and here. Included in the agenda packet is the advertisement for bids for this. This is the nearing the culmination of the various sidewalk items you've taken in on the agenda in the past couple months of this is the city's bid for the areas that you've approved for new sidewalks and repairs, again, in the last couple months. And our contractor, the typical process and what we've used that's been effective is he'll bid the work, and we write it into the bid that if there is he leaves the option for the landowners to do the work, and we just deduct that from the amount that the contractor would accomplish. He knows that, and we put that clearly into the plans. And so that's what this does. There's several city properties in this, as we have discussed previously as well. That work, of course, would be guaranteed, and they can commence on that while they're waiting and giving the landowners opportunities to do their work. So this is authorize advertising, and then we'll go ahead and take the necessary steps in the finance office to put this to meet the statutory requirements for advertising, and then we'll proceed to open bids accordingly.
Thank you, Chad. Do I have a motion to set bid date of March 4th for bid number 900, Sidewalk Improvement Project 2021-1?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or discussion?
I got one question, Chad. The reasoning for the different ramps in your package here,
There's various circumstances that warrant different layouts of ramps. Some would be close along the curb if there's a narrow right-of-way, for example. Sometimes it's economics. If it's not a safety hazard, to use a diagonal ramp. And so this was a typical detail that we put together, and it applies to the specific details as laid out in some of the other plan sheets where we give the contractor specific guidance as to how to build the ramps in that particular location. It's just a standard detail that shows how to build that, whichever one is chosen.
Okay. I just noticed some had them, and then it looks like you're going to redo them maybe.
Yes, yeah, that's been part of the process too. In past years, when there's routes selected where there's ADA deficiencies, again, when there's routes selected as opposed to an area-wide approach, we make it ADA accessible in the entire route. So you notice that some ramps where there are being put in where there are none now.
Those are just curbs.
Yeah, it
Okay.
varies. Most of them are probably just curbs where there's a drop off. Some of them may be just a non-compliant ramp, and some of them may not even be present. So it just depends on the particulars of each particular location. These areas are all further previous areas that you had approved on those resolutions.
Any further comments or discussion? Yep.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yes?
You're gonna make people put in sidewalks this year after a pandemic. You don't suppose some residents have had a tough time?
They do have the option to come in and ask for a year of, up to a year to extend that. Is that correct, Chad?
Yeah, they can come before the commission and ask for it.
And Dan, that has been brought up this year,
Okay.
and I have directed them to come in and ask for a variance to hold off, if they would like to. Yes?
I guess that would be 1 year. Might take more people to recover after more than 1 year after that. That's just a comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. The other comments?
What percentage is city property, Chad, would you, your best guess
On this particular
of this?
year,
Yes.
probably about 30%. And when it's said and done, probably about another 40 to 50% of the property owners will end up doing their own as well. That's kind of how it's been breaking down over the years.
But we took a larger portion this year though too.
Correct. Yeah, it is. This is probably one of the larger years of city installs that we've had, probably in the 16 years that we've been doing the program.
Sonia, will you take the roll call vote?
Commissioner Thill,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Wire,
Aye.
Mayor Denner.
Aye. Anything on COVID? One good thing about being this cold out, no one's gonna be out about.
Keep our numbers down.
Okay, public comment?
Just Tess.
Huh?
Tess, she's on.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I just wanted to provide an update based on the energy alerts that were sent out today by the electric department. As of an hour ago, the Southwest Power Pool sent out a notice that by them directing some of the utilities this afternoon to implement controlled interruptions, which was not something we were directed to do, but they did do that to some. They were able to lower their load enough to provide power for everyone that they needed to. I think that the main thing that I need to reiterate to our customers is to continue the course for the next few days until you hear otherwise from our department. We really appreciate all the efforts that the factories, the residents, everyone is doing to shave peak and reduce the load. It is all, it's being effective. So if you would please continue the course, we would appreciate it.
okay, thank you. Any announcements?
I'd like to just add to what Tess had to say. The grid is obviously strained, so what we can do to decrease electricity use, and we don't foresee any outages, but you never know. It looks like sounds like we're doing a good job decreasing our electricity use, but just please be smart about your electrical consumption the next few days.
Anything else? No exec session. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, and have a good evening.
Chad.